looking at a whole system and observing and being humble enough to go, we got this wrong. We need to do this differently. So they were removing the coyotes and realised that their gopher problem was getting worse as a result. That happens. That's a great analogy of what's happening in lots of areas. We do something, but the problem is getting worse.
Hello, everyone. Another episode in my special guest series. I have Barb Howard, one of the great people in our community, who mainly works with farmers in Western Australia. So, we're going to discuss food, the quality of the food, and regenerative agriculture. And also we're going to discuss some of the being related matters, the being discourse, the quality of human beings, our aspects of being, how they may be related to how we deal with agriculture and farming and the food that we put on our table. Barb, would you like to introduce yourself to our audience?
Good morning, Ashkan. Yes, that's great. I'm have a background as a leadership coach and primarily in community development over about 20 years. And I've also become a holistic management educator in the last 12 months. So I work a lot with farmers in Western Australia.
Awesome. So it's a while now we know each other. When you joined our community, you were interested in the being discourse, and you attended some of our programs and everything. Now, tell us a little bit about what made you be interested in leadership coaching, and what brought you here, first of all.
I think it was part of a journey that I'd been on for quite a few years, particularly around learning more about ontology, about ways of being. I'd had a life upset in 2013, and I realised I needed to have a look at myself and how I showed up in the world. So that was a period, I guess, of deep self-reflection. And those people that I met on that journey, and they were from right around Australia, introduced me. One of those people, John Smallwood, introduced me to the being profile. And it was really fortuitous. It was great timing. It was a framework that could help explain ways of being in a way that I probably couldn't do consistently every time I talk to somebody.
Mm.
But I found understanding how we show up in the world and how it affects what happens to be so
Mm.
valuable. Um,
Yeah,
and yeah, so that was 2019.
sure, sure. Thank you. So, you have background in agriculture, yeah, and so you shared with me before. I know your story, but how about you share also with our audience so that they know where you're coming from? You are in the leadership space. You care about personal development and leadership development, but your background is in part coming from agriculture,
Mm.
and like you had that in your family, in your upbringing, and to the point that then now you are more interested in certain type of agriculture, and you have views around that we want to discuss it today.
Mm.
But would you like to share with our audience where you are coming from? Yeah.
Sure. So I came from a farm in South Canterbury, New Zealand. Was my father's shadow, eldest child and daughter. Was very interested in what happened on a farm from a very early age, and worked on the farm from a young age as well. So I was really just immersed in agriculture, and there was lots of changes happening over that time. That was in the 1980s when it was, get big or get out. We were a small mixed farm that was uh, did well enough to be able to support 4 kids. right through high school education, and I was just seeing more and more money go out the door on sprays and pesticides. Dad would have the sheep in the yards, more and more spraying them. And I was working on a horticultural farm as well in the area, and we did a lot of spraying too. And it really started to concern me about what it is we were eating. And
Yeah.
I just tried to believe at the time that if you washed it, it all went away. But I left. I got a very serious condition myself when I was 17, and it was an endocrine disorder. And so I was now dealing with the consequences myself. So I left agriculture. I felt I needed to be away from, sprays. I lived in an area where it was top dressing from aeroplanes. So it was difficult to
Mm,
get away from it. So I went to the city, really turned my back on agriculture for a number of years. Um, and I was in Sydney, and I was dealing with some health conditions there. And I just started looking more deeply into sources of food then, and decided to return to New Zealand with my husband. And I was pregnant, and we bought a small farm ourselves. And I was going to do it different.
mm,
I was going to do
yeah,
it without any sprays and what have you. It was a difficult journey for 7 years.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you very much for your vulnerability in sharing your personal journey. And sometimes we may not necessarily like to go into the personal stories, but actually, when you see someone being so obsessed with something, they try to raise awareness. The inventors, the people that they invent new ways, better ways, and the solution makers, the entrepreneurs, some of the people that they so care about fixing certain problems. When you go down deep from a psychological perspective, you clearly see that they have some personal stories that made them being receptive and present to that very specific pain. Now, when they manage to effectively create a narrative and share that, communicate it with a group of people out there, they um, when they see that there are groups of people out there that they resonate with the pain that they are narrating, then there is a validated market as well, or validated
Mm.
audience. So yeah, it's quite fascinating how our personal experiences and journeys and the stories contribute into the calling that perhaps occupy us. Yeah,
I wasn't
yeah,
so aware that there was any sort of calling.
mm,
What I saw was that uh, women didn't get a lot of support in agriculture back in my time, and women that were concerned about what was going into the food they were feeding their
mhm,
children weren't really being heard. Yet I was involved with I was an administrator for an early childhood education facility, and we were seeing lots of issues with kids becoming more and more prevalent with attention deficit disorder and the likes. And there were definitely connections to
yeah,
be
yeah,
made, but the focus at the time was really on what medication does a child need to make them normal, act normally, whatever that might mean. Um, and there was very little support for organics. The conversations I had were with the women who had married local farmers that came from Europe or came from
yeah,
America. They had some understanding. So, what really has driven me has been the making sure that people have the
mm,
support to take a different path because they are dealing with
yeah,
the concerns personally of a system that may not be
yeah.
working.
Okay, now I understand. So, how do you relate to the term, the word calling? Uh, what did it land me?
Calling. Oh, Um, it's interesting because I've been listening hard
Mm,
for what it
yeah,
is, and I remember going through periods of time going, "What is it that I'm
yeah,
here
yeah,
for? What am I meant to be
yeah.
doing?" I've done a lot of work with Aboriginal people, so I'm expecting a bird to come and tell me what it is that I need to be
mm,
doing, but it really is paying attention to
yeah,
nature. And you find, where are the disconnects? What are the places and spaces we can take up that help,
mm,
be the bridge between one degree of understanding and
mm,
another. So, in terms of, uh, is it my calling? Yes, it was discovered later in
mm,
life, I guess. I would have been, in my late
yeah,
40s. It feels late to be finding the thing that really
yeah,
motivates you, but it was a journey to
yeah,
get there.
of course, yeah, yeah. No,
Mm,
we're on the same page with regards to that. Like, it's often like that, into my experience working with people. It's often like that. There are signs and messages that you receive by basically paying attention to certain things, and then you
mm,
see that there is this high frequency in thoughts, that they don't leave you alone. So
mm.
and then all of a sudden you choose them powerfully, and then they become your purpose in a sense. So um yeah, so um tell me a little bit more.
I was unwilling to
I'll
do
go.
sorry, Ashkan, I just wanted to say I was unwilling to do the choosing for
Oh
quite
yeah,
a long time because I knew it was going to be a very big task.
that is.
So I
No,
ignored the
thank you
signs.
for saying that. That is often the case. There are phenomenological patterns that, like, we often resist,
Mm,
the thoughts, that they bug us in a way,
mm,
and we resist because we think that there are alternative ways, there are easier ways, but sometimes it's like that, like, they don't leave us alone, and that's a kind of, there's a state of surrender when you surrender to the thing, that
mm,
they don't leave you alone in a sense. And I've seen that a lot. This conversation may not be as rational as we would love it to be, but many of these extremely successful people in multiple different realms, but mostly entrepreneurs, I've seen they actually found that. And some people call it passion, some people call it different things, calling, or but beyond, like, what term we want to use to refer to them, there is this thing that you somehow know that you need to take it seriously, you need to give it what it takes, and you may
mm,
escape, you may try to cover them up and resist, but yeah, at some point you may choose them powerfully and then go. Okay, so um, so you became quite present to how important the food is, but see, most people may not pay that level of attention to where exactly the food that they're consuming they're coming from. So you go to the grocery shop in the store, and you're seeing all of these veggies, all of these meat, and everything that you get, and you don't really pay attention to what process they've gone through, so that they become that fancy piece of a steak, or that almost perfect looking apple or broccoli or whatever basically you're buying it. So what do you have to share with our audience, with the people out there, when it comes to that?
mm. Well, there were a couple of other aha moments for me uh, earlier on when I joined the Royal Flying Doctor Service in Kalgoorlie and noticed that we were having lots of patients that had mental health conditions or metabolic disease. We were having to order planes with bigger doors because people were getting bigger, and that is a sign of metabolic disorder. So there were things that were happening around me that I was paying attention to. I didn't have answers to, and also my son became diabetic, type 1 diabetic, when he was 11. So I had to pay a lot of attention to food. And surprisingly, I was being directed away from fresh fruit and vegetables and more towards packaged processed food because it would have a carbohydrate number on the back that we could calculate insulin requirements against. So there were lots of things that were really starting to bug me, and life really wasn't working for me because I was so upset about these things. And I was also aware in places, regional places like WA, small towns and remote communities didn't have access to good quality fruit and vegetables. So there was not a lot of choice back then. So it wasn't looking for something perfect, I can assure you. It was just looking for something that was fresh. Um, we certainly had big supermarkets and the likes, but things had been en route for a long time to get to us. Because I'd been at the other end, working on a horticulture property when I was younger, I knew how much got wasted as well, and how picky people had become about things being perfectly shaped and perfectly coloured and all the rest of it. So the I guess it had been a lifelong curiosity because and here's the interesting thing: I didn't even realise I was involved in
Hmm.
food when I
Yeah.
was farming. I didn't think about it. We produce commodities. Um, And then when I realised that what gets produced on a farm ends up on a plate somewhere, uh, and who is doing the producing locally. So in 2021, I think it was, we decided to eat locally for a
Okay.
year just to find out who was doing what and where does it come from and what's the journey of the farmer to get that product to the market for us to choose. Um, so underlying it all was curiosity, and I was also very concerned about
Mhm.
landscapes degrading. Um, so looking at farming practices, my grandfather had been an entrepreneur in farming. He had bought the first traction engine across to New Zealand, and I was now really starting to see the impact of a lot of mechanisation in landscape. So there were lots of things, and it was just really bringing them together. So I listened to an entrepreneurial farmer from the US, Joel Salatin. And I guess he just connected it all up for me: soil health, plant health, gut health, human
Mm.
health, mental health. It's
Connected.
all,
Yeah.
what we do to the soil, we do
Yeah.
to ourselves.
So
Yeah.
because like so for example, when it comes to the healthy soil, because that's one of the concern that you've mentioned you have, and see, like before we even go there, it's like sometimes when we start talking about these things, it may sound quite radical, yeah. Many people may not even resonate with that in the first glance because they go, "Oh, what do you mean? Like we have food, the supermarket is just there, and then we have
Mm,
access to the food, and they look great, and but so the thing that you became present to, as I'm hearing, it's like the integrity, the connectedness between all these
mm,
symptoms and medical conditions and mental conditions that you could see even firsthand. Like you dealt with it in your family, as you mentioned, and then you're looking into the root of the matter, and not
mm,
whatever information is readily available. You look into the root cause. Why is it that it's like that? And then it spark the thing for you to go to this journey, embark on this journey of
mm.
discovery to learn. And um, so yeah, so and it's quite interesting to see like all of these activities that happens in the soil.
There
Mm.
was an aha moment when I did a holistic
Okay.
management course, and he was talking about managing
Mhm.
pasture, and all we ever focused on was managing
Yeah.
livestock. It was about the livestock. It wasn't about the pasture. It wasn't about what was going on underneath the soil. I'd certainly seen my father plough paddocks numerous
Mm.
times and seen the soil degrade. I'd been in New South Wales and Victoria when there were big dust
Mm.
storms. I had seen dust coming across to New Zealand and ending up on the mountains there. So it really was spending time, and that's what the gift COVID gave to me, the time to sit and think about it all and start just connecting it up and going, right, what are we
Yeah.
doing? Because you're right, it does look like there's plenty of food, and we do produce 40% more food than we use. We
Yeah,
waste a
there's
lot of
a
food,
lot of waste.
but
Mm.
our ability to keep on doing this is getting less and less as our soil degrades. So,
Mm.
several kilos of soil, and I don't want to misquote Matthew Evans, but it was, let's say it's 6 kilos of soil per
Mm.
meal that we have that we lose into the ocean. We're not going to have the soil to be able to grow the food.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very interesting to me. Like so we're talking about the quality of the food. We're talking about wastage. There, behind the wastage, there is a lack of presence or lack of awareness and lack of gratitude in a sense. And then you mentioned
Mm,
um, managing not just the livestock but the pasture, yeah. And so it reminds me of this story in the Bible around about Cain and Abel. Yeah. Now, this is not a religious conversation. It's just like I'm using that my interpretation of the piece of the story there. And you see that God, the superpower, um, asked for a sacrifice. Now, so here Cain, Abel is um, a pasturer, a shepherd, and goes and brings the best of the best lamb and sheep that he has, and God accepts it. And then it comes to Cain, and Cain is a farmer, and Cain goes and brings one of the very crappy crops or whatever it was, I can't recall, and bring it. Now we just pause the story just there, yeah. Um, so one of these two characters is a manifestation of awareness, presence, and gratitude in a sense that I know and I acknowledge that it's not me who move the clouds. It's not me who calls the rain. It's not me who plant the grass. Like it's not me doing all of these things. Like I know that I am part of a bigger whole, and as a part in this whole
mm,
system, I'm a contributing factor, a very unique contributing factor, because you have consciousness, and you have
mm,
intentional consciousness. You can actually cause something, and that's in part why both we are damaging, and at the same time we can influence the way that things go in the ecosystem. But on the other side, like if we take Cain as a kind of archetype, it's like this person who is not even present to the fact that, oh, like there's all of these different entities are surrendered to their rightful duty or function in the nature so
mm,
that things work. I'm ignoring that and
mm,
averting my gaze away from that, and it's all about me and how I deal with it. So I'm not even willing to give some of the good crops that I'm producing to God. Yeah. So um, this interconnectedness, like between everything. So that was one big part that it made you to actually start looking into this, and and something you would
mm.
like other people also to be aware of, yeah. And I think this is partly
Yeah.
why you work with the farmers, and try to use different ways, including the being discourse, to communicate to them how important it is actually to look into the being authentic around shaping their conceptions of reality as things are. Um, and 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 what is the reward to that? Like what was in it for you, and what do you think is in it for people who are listening to us or watching us, if they take these conversations seriously?
Mm. What I did was bring together what I thought were the best tools
Mhm,
available to help people understand their own agency
mhm.
and what's happening, and also be aware that they are
Yeah.
part of a whole that's much bigger than them, and they have, yeah, as you say, have influence over that and influence
Mm.
over themselves. So, what I saw growing up was a lot of disconnected conversations between my
mm,
parents. So my father came from a farming background and my mother
mm,
did not. Um, they were always talking at cross purposes, sometimes quite loudly. There was lots of discussions about money. I didn't really see anything working very well for any
yeah,
length of time. Yet it was a great uh, choice for a family growing up to be all working together on something. So I thought there must be a better way of doing it, where the two business owners who happen to be married to each other could communicate more effectively with each other so they are achieving what it is that they want to achieve. So part of the work that we do with them is to get clear on what their
yeah,
goal is. So my husband and I work together as well. So we're sort of living and breathing it too. Um, so I guess if you boiled it right down, I was just trying to fix what I didn't see was working
mm,
in my own upbringing, even though that kind of lifestyle and what we contributed to society was
yeah,
really valuable and honourable, I think. So, what do I get out of it now? There's a huge amount of uh, satisfaction in seeing people being able to work together better and achieving much bigger things than they could on
mm,
their own. And it's extending beyond the farm to the
mhm,
community. So they're clients of ours that work with several people in the community. They have people on their property working some of the land to grow vegetables. They've got a on-farm shop where people can come and get fresh
yeah,
vegetables. Um, one of the things I guess I really would like people not to have to go through is some of the experiences that I had with kids with ill
mm,
health. And I'm also getting friends coming to me who have now got
mm,
cancer in their 40s and 50s. They've still got children. This is not the outcome that we want to be seeing, and it's
mm,
affecting women more than
mm,
men. So
mm,
the child rearers, they're dealing with kids with illnesses and then they become ill themselves. So we're having this very
yeah,
long death as opposed to a long life where our health
yeah,
is
yeah.
deteriorating over time.
Yeah. So the thing is, like, let's like take that this assumption that the many of these um, so basically the quality of our food is directly contributing into many of these mental, physical, chronic pains or different types of diseases and problems. Many of them are not showing up right there and then, so we
Mm,
think that oh, it's all safe. That
mm,
basically includes even the way that the authorities sometimes they deal with them. For example, in the United States, FDA, like yes, they have all these different ways to go and like, create compliance lists and everything. But we know down deep there, and there's lots of information about some of the preservatives, like the things that we put in the food, the way that we feed the farm animals, we keep them, all these and also as you mentioned, like how we maintain the soil, et cetera, et cetera. These all are contributing factors. Now, so what would be your message? And like, see, like for a person to deeply go in and try and understand all of that, and then develop congruent, authentic conceptions of all of this, it's like basically so much. Yeah, that's why we normally outsource um, those type of things to authorities. We outsource those things to the expert. But this area, food, is literally an area that on a daily basis we're dealing with it. Yeah.
mm.
So what would be your suggestion? Like, would you suggest like everyone goes and then like deeply try and understand all of
You
these
don't
and
need to do that. No,
yeah.
just buy organic, eat organic. So there's
So
plenty
it boils
of,
down to that, like just eat organic, like that's what you're
well,
saying.
all that certification work has been done. So you don't
Mm,
have to do it yourself. That's the one great thing about the organic process, and it is changing and evolving over time. But
mm,
the um, you can rely on those certifications that you see on cans of beans and the like.
Mhm.
So I guess that's what we really discovered when we ate locally, was that we weren't necessarily supporting our health by doing that. We were very
Mhm.
focused on food miles and making sure that the food wasn't coming from the other side of the world. Um,
Yeah.
but then we started to see the health implications for ourselves. So
Mhm.
we decided at that point that actually making sure we ate organic vegetables and canned products, keeping the food as simple as possible.
So you
So,
said, sorry, you said
um,
canned products?
yeah, like canned beans or canned tomatoes if they're not available locally.
Yeah.
Yes, because we were eating locally, so it had to be produced locally.
Yeah.
Those sort of things are much better
Oh,
for your
interesting.
health. Mm.
Wow. So let's just stay there. I think that I found that interesting now. That you're saying that if you eat canned fruit, like for example, canned tomatoes, it's better than getting fresh tomatoes that are not organic.
Yes,
Interesting. And
yes.
and does that canned tomato need to be organic?
Well, yes, that's what I'm saying.
Yes,
Canned
that's what you're
tomatoes that
saying.
are organic. Yes,
Canned
yes,
tomatoes that are organic, like even that
yes.
is better than getting the fresh. Okay, interesting. Yeah. So,
Because it's been through a process that's making sure that there are not herbicides and pesticides used.
mm, so can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Well, there are certifiers in Australia that
Yeah.
they certify the farmer. They go
Hmm.
through their processes to
Yeah.
make sure that um, what they're using is okay. It may not necessarily be regenerating the soil. That's another
Yeah.
step that the farmer chooses to take,
Yeah.
and it's a sensible step to take because you want to maintain the production
Yeah.
levels of your farm. But yeah, so there are certifiers that will go through that process and they will tick off that that farm is providing organic produce to the standards that Australia
Mm,
has right now. We don't have a domestic standard. That's in the process
mm,
of being resolved.
yeah.
Um, yeah, so as I say, it's ongoing and evolving,
Yeah.
but that can be counted on if you want to go in that health journey, to make
Yeah.
sure that you are limiting your exposure, because part of the issue, Ashkan, is that we are bioaccumulating these sorts of things.
Yeah.
Lots of things that are out there, and chemicals that are used for fire retardants and the likes, microplastics.
Yeah.
um, some people are going to be able to cope with that a little better than others, but
Yeah.
you know that's what we've got to be aware of. So, what are the things we can actually do to
Yeah.
reduce our exposure?
No, I understand. So, one of the greatest documentaries that I've ever watched, yeah, being this sincerely curious person around some of these areas, um, was it's called the Biggest Little Farm. I think you should have you watched it, yeah,
Well, I have, yes,
yeah. Yeah.
yes,
So this
a
the
couple of times.
Biggest Little yeah,
Mm,
it was really amazing to actually look into. So for me, like beyond the science of it. So basically, like for those of you who don't know, like basically the whole documentary is about this couple in the U.S. that they decide at some point they want to build this organic farm, and they go through the journey. And I'm not going to spoil the documentary. It's very engaging, and I would definitely recommend that. And so in that, it shows like I think in the course of 7 years, like they go
mm,
through like authentic education of, I mean, educating themselves around how things work. They don't have much understanding of agriculture, organic agriculture. There are areas that they don't even really know, like how to um, preserve the soil, contribute to its increased quality in a way, in an organic manner.
mm.
And they go through this journey, and they have this person. I think in the movie, he's called Alan. who is
Mm.
basically this expert, that guides them in things. So yeah, so it was really interesting in the documentary to see both. I mean, like on a philosophical end of it, was very interesting to me to see how each and every of these different constituent parts in this ecosystem, man-made ecosystem in a sense, you can say the farm, not the whole nature. It should mimic the way that nature works if
Yes.
it's going to go organic. So, for example, like it was showing how you, for example, you need the waste of the cows, and then like the nuggets are going to be coming up, and then the chicken would go and then take the nuggets, or they had problem with the snails, and then they learned that they bring the ducks to eat the
Yeah.
snails, and that was quite interesting to me that from, I mean, from a trans historical perspective, how this how farming has got, I mean, it was being shaped in a way, the traditions behind farming, which is my guess is like there is a massive level of commonalities across cultures and different places in the world, I'm guessing. Yeah, is that the things, like many different cultures throughout history have been taking care of organic farming in some sort of similar ways, or it's
Yes, and many
radically.
civilizations have, their demise was met because of how they managed their soil.
Yeah,
They've collapsed. Yeah. I
was
think the point
collapsed.
that you
Yeah.
make about mimicking nature is was critical, and the the guy, I can't think of his name, but he was a filmmaker, so he was very aware. He paid a lot of attention, and they had problems with gophers burrowing around their fruit trees,
Mm,
and he realised by paying attention, by filming at night, that the
mm,
coyotes actually played a very important role. So the top level predator, which we've taken out of many systems
mm,
because they are dangerous, to us and to livestock, and the whole system starts collapsing. So Yellowstone National Park in the US, they've reintroduced wolves, and the
yeah.
land is regenerating.
I've seen some
Mm.
videos on that. Yeah, very interesting. So what it appears in our eyes, see, that's the thing. I often talk about the invisible,
Mm.
and in a sense that there are so many things that we don't know, and a belief structure that acknowledges the invisible is extremely important. Even, for example, if you look into the philosophy of science, as a scientist, you should believe and see that that can be a little bit contradictory. So, oh, I'm a scientist, I don't believe in anything.
Mm.
But no, actually, like for you to be a scientist, in a traditional sense of science, you
Mm.
need to still have, you already, not you need to, you already have a belief structure. You have a value structure that are not scientific, but they're more like, you could call them metaphysical and ethical axioms, and that you tap into. For example, you acknowledge that there are truth out there, objectively, and then you need to also tap into this view that a good part of this truth is comprehensible to human mind, and so on. Yeah, so there is a belief structure there, and this fundamental belief that there are invisible, it's extremely important. See, for example, we we may only think that there are worms in that's a typical perception, that there are only worms in the soil, and then you go and then get them from Bunnings or other places, and then you put it in the soil, and then you think that it should be all right. But then when you look actually into it deeply, you see there's so much going on in the soil that you step on so easily, but there's so much going on, this microbial, and all that life that goes under your feet. So if you don't believe in the invisible, then you don't even go and seek what's there. And that basically, I think, was one of the most important things in scientific revolution, us realizing, coming to this realization that we are ignorant, and it was not a piece of information, a piece of knowledge that made us believe in science, but actually the idea that we are ignorant and we don't know much, and we
Mm,
should believe in the
mm.
invisible, and then make try the science being the attempt to make some parts of those invisible visible.
I
Yeah,
think I shared with you earlier, Ashkan, I had no idea that there was anything more than worms in the soil. I mean,
yeah, yeah.
slaters and things like that, but all of these things that I couldn't see, because I couldn't see them, I didn't know they were there, and I didn't
Yeah.
know the role they played. And that's what we end up killing off with sprays and things, is that biology in the soil that those plants actually require to
Mm.
function properly. So, yes, it's been the stuff that we haven't been able to see, and it's being the science is helping with that.
At the same time, so this is I think this is very links to a bigger conversation that I have from a philosophical perspective, and then it manifests itself in many constructs and institutions that we have created so far. See, yes, the science is helping us to actually discover these things, but then the intentions behind the science or the intentions of the scientist is also extremely important, because I think that it was also science that gave birth to the creation of all this mess. Like the
Yes, yes,
yeah, so this is the
yes.
paradoxical thing, the nano plastic, microplastics, and all
Yeah.
of these things that it's the creation, or this whole idea that, oh, we need to go and then take this land and only we want to produce lime in it, and that's it, or
Mm,
and not understanding that this is not the way that the nature works. So
mm,
in another way, what we're doing quite arrogantly on on top of this intellectual substrate of humanism, putting human being in the center, as if like we are the epicenter of the universe and everything should
mm,
just serve us, and we can dare to do whatever we wish with, and that those things should not have any consequences. But as you mentioned, like they're coming and biting us. So that's
yeah.
actually a very humbling. I think it should be quite humbling when it should bring this epistemic humility to look into this thing that, oh, see, science as a tool here, as a framework of thought, as a tool is there, and we can do so many things with it. But what is your intention? What is your ethical framework? Yeah, what exactly do we want? Are we axiologically, are we prioritizing efficiency, let's say, or
Mm.
quality of the food that we are taking in? The byproduct
Well,
of that, as you mentioned, like it's like all of these diseases that then we need to go and then fix them because
mm.
we haven't addressed some of these fundamental problems. So,
And many of the discoveries have been done, looking at nature, observing nature, and replicating it, and to make life easier for humans, without necessarily understanding the consequences. Some things, the consequences may well be known, but longitudinal studies haven't been done. But when we start seeing things showing up and we don't question what's happening, we just keep going the way we're going with this reductionist look
mm,
at things. That's
yeah,
when we start getting into strife, and we are dealing with multiple consequences now.
mm,
Our farming practices is definitely contributing to climate change, with all this bared off land and heat that's
yeah,
coming off it. So it is a humbling time to really take a look at what is it that we are doing, what do we need to change.
yeah,
But looking at that whole system, which, circling back to the biggest little farm, that's what they were doing. They were looking at a
yeah,
whole
yeah,
system and
yeah,
observing and being humble enough to go, we got this wrong. We
yeah,
need to do this differently. So they were removing the coyotes and realised that their gopher problem was getting worse as a result. That happens. That's a great analogy of what's
yeah,
happening in lots of areas. We do
yeah,
something,
yeah,
but the problem is getting
yeah.
worse.
So, see, yeah, definitely. Like I can clearly see this pattern. Now, like obviously, I'm not an expert in this field, but as you know, of I'm studying health science now, and I'm becoming more and more present to um, all of this. Now, in saying that, so we talked about the compliance. We talked about like institutions such as FDA in the United States or similar I mean, um, institutions here in Australia. And in one of the episodes that I had with in this series with James Shepard, this friend of mine who actually we built a business with him around food safety. He works with for many years. He's been working with food facilities and ensuring that there's not much damage received to human beings from something so avoidable, food poisoning, for example. Yeah.
Mm.
Now, so we talk about compliance. You talked about compliance. You said there are authorities actually looking into these things, et cetera, et cetera. But another question is, and then I talked about like all of these institutions and constructs we built on top of this existing dominant intellectual substrate, and to what extent do we should trust really? Yeah. So this is I don't want this to turn to a kind of controversial conversation, but to what degree we need to trust that? You know.
Uh, well, it's the best that we've got right now,
Mhm.
and I think we have to eat. It's
Yeah.
not something we can choose not to do.
Yeah.
And the consumer getting involved and getting more
Yeah.
interested and paying attention.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the what we have right now with certification of organic is the best that we've got. It is evolving. We have to eat every day, so it's not something that we can choose not to do.
Yeah.
So I think it's perfectly perfectly acceptable choice to make.
Yeah.
Uh, and we need to get some consumer activism happening as well. So
Yeah.
consumers need to be more aware of what it is that they are eating. And if they're not happy about the level of pesticides and herbicides used in food production, they need to start talking about it.
Mm.
And that's how change happens. And we
Yeah.
need to support farmers on this journey because we have very degraded soils now. They are going to need to be supported to make the transition. As you said, from biggest little farm, it doesn't happen overnight. It can take several years to
Yeah.
reverse the damage that's been done to soil. I think that's where we're at. Is that we just need to become much more aware of what it is that we are eating every day, because the consequences I see, particularly for women, mothers, is that they're spending an awful lot of time having to take children to doctors. The dealing with the consequences of um, some of these conditions their kids have, what teachers are dealing with.
This is crazy. Yeah. So imagine that like something quite as simple as food. I'm not saying production of food is simple. I'm saying something quite basic as food. We're not taking certain important things into consideration due to our inauthentic, incongruent understanding of it, and then it's causing lots of different problems for us. And then not only it's degrading the soil, as you said, it's going to it has some impact on the climate. It then create like all these cause all these diseases and everything. Then we need to have the medical practitioners getting involved, and they need to be dealing with all of that. And then Medicare and medical costs is going to be imposed. Like, I mean, so much so many problems going to arise on the surface.
Mm,
And the problem is that to address these problems, it's not just to go and then try to fix every single leaf on this tree, um, but actually to go and address the root causes. And that's what,
mm,
like when I said the man-made constructs and the institutions we've created. And the like when I say man-made constructs, like it includes like the patterns of consumptions, for example.
mm,
And but if you don't go back and look down deeper, identify what are the contributing factors into that. And beyond science, because science can be extremely useful, it's necessary, but it's not enough because, like at best, science can release all these papers and
Mm.
help us see the consequences. But at the end of the day, will you, as an individual, be the one who is going to prioritize that in their value structure, in the hierarchy of values?
By the
Yeah,
time you've got that information, it could be too late. Like,
yeah,
that information takes a long time to become publicly
yeah.
available as well. So it's taking some agency over our own decisions. Um, if I think about my own experience dealing with dietitians and my son's managing my son's uh, medical condition, which is
Mm,
lifelong, um, it was it was a shocking way to be introduced to. Um, the only way you can manage this is through being able to read labels so you can calculate carbohydrates, so you know to give him the right amount of insulin, and to give him the wrong amount can be
yeah.
fatal. It's a lot of responsibility for somebody to be taking on. Oh, it didn't come from a nursing background or anything like that. So the by the time my son was diagnosed in, well, he was 11, so it would have been in 2004 or round about then, I
Yeah.
think. Um, he was the only one in his school. By the time he left primary school, there were three in his
Mm,
class with type 1 diabetes. Like, you could see it was really increasing quite quickly. So we've got to start asking questions ourselves and not just be reliant on information that's coming out of
mm,
research too. We need to be letting, because it's, those two things work together. When the community starts complaining that we have a lot of these problems, then money goes towards the
yeah,
research
yeah.
as well. And that's what's really required. It is a difficult one to point to any individual thing because there's so many contaminants
Mm, mm,
in our environment
yeah,
now. But it is the one thing that we can get some control over and decide what it is that we're going to consume.
yeah, yeah. I get it. So now, so I don't like. I've tried not to go much deep. Even I've tried to do my best not to use certain terminologies or encourage you to go too technical, because the intention with this series is actually to bring awareness around niche areas, like the areas, multiple different dimensions of our life, but looking into the problems and going from this perspective that many of these problems they stem from inauthenticities, incongruencies, misconceptions that we have, or when we are unaware of something, we are oblivious, or we know something but we deliberately ignore them. So
Mm.
um, now, long story short, what do you think that is available at this stage is, you said that like it's good for them to actually for people to look into what food they take and where the food is coming from, at least know some basics around that. But the easy way to go is if they can afford it, they just go organic. And we discussed trust
Yeah.
and whether you can trust it or not, but that's a separate conversation. That this is what we have available, and that it's feasible, like for many people to actually consider. The second thing is, and the next thing is, I wanted to bring up was, and that's the last conversation we want to have, is like, how about self-sufficiency to a degree? I know that like lots
Mm.
of people are trying to now learn, go back to the roots, like putting that kind of a radical urban life aside if they can,
Mm.
and try to plant certain, I mean, like their herbs, or some people are keeping chickens, like we actually experienced it ourselves in our property and everything. And like when you have x number of chicken, depends on how many eggs you would consume, then like you can easily go self-sufficient, and you're going to create less wastage, and like
Mm.
and then the rubbish that needs to be taken through the traffic, and you know the trucks that need to come and then take the rubbish out and then dispose them. So it's going to be used in great part just having chicken at home, and you're going to end up having better quality eggs and etc. etc. So what do you think? How feasible that is? I know that you've previously shared with me that you've gone through some level of
Mm,
self-sufficiency for some time. Yeah.
mm,
So how feasible do you think is for an average person with like living in urban areas or around urban areas so that they can actually take care of some good part of their food?
mm. Well, we used to be able to do it, so I think it's possible.
Mhm.
60% of the food was produced in backyards in London during the Second World War, and people were healthier.
Mhm.
So it is possible. It's more challenging, certainly for us in WA at the moment with a drying climate.
Mm.
We haven't had
Yeah.
rain, I think it's almost 8 months now.
Mhm.
You do need to get, uh, into the understanding of what's going on in soil because it can, there's going to be a lot of failures. We had, we would produce 50 pumpkins a season on our property. This year we've produced none. Now, there's a
Oh,
number of reasons that we're trying to get epigenetically suited seeds for our environment, and we may have gone wrong somewhere there. So you have to be prepared that you're going to have a few failures. We feed far too much to the wildlife,
yeah, yeah,
but I think Bernard's harvested about 50 kilos of olives from our
yeah,
trees, our property. So it depends on, you've got to grow what grows in your area, not what you like to eat necessarily.
yeah, yeah.
And particularly if you're looking after livestock, you've got to be very intentional around their needs, meeting their needs. Because if it's hot or they have to have access to fresh water, that sort of
Okay.
thing. So you got to be switched on to that sort of
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, yeah. Well,
Um,
we actually gone through it, like as you know, like um, in the last couple of years, and tried to do somewhat, but sometimes it's really hard doing like planting some strawberries. It was really annoying because as I was planting them, and then I wait exactly for the moment I can go and then have the fruit. And we had these mice or rats or whatever, or rabbits or whatever. For
like,
example, like I plant some eggplants and tomatoes, and lots of water came, like the massive rain and everything, and they started go rotten.
yes,
It's hard, but then gradually, like we managed to learn a little bit more and everything. And I think that that was part indispensable or inevitable part of life in the past. But from the, I mean, modern times and
you really appreciate
the
what farmers
mass
go through
production.
when you try it yourself and have those sort of failures. And like, you've
Yes,
got to be smarter than a rat. And that takes a bit
yeah,
because they will get there
yeah.
just before you're about to harvest.
That was a good one. Like you need to be smarter than a
Yeah.
rat, and you need to start from there. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and definitely I can see that helps us develop way more appreciation for the food that we sometimes don't have. Like when you start growing yourself, then you really respect that
Mm,
tomato.
mm,
You don't want any of it being wasted. Awesome. So I'm a little bit mindful of
mm.
time. I think it was great conversation, Barb, having you here. I could imagine. I hope that our audience also finds it valuable. And if we manage to encourage any of the audience to actually consider, even if you don't know the mechanism and you're not even willing to go through the studies and everything. um you said, Barb, that just go organic, like that's one of the things that you said. And the last conversation we just had was, if you can take care of some part of your food, at least like something is better than nothing.
Mm.
So yeah, you can start from there. Any final um message
No, I think
before we wrap
you've wrapped it up
this episode?
beautifully, but just start paying attention, and you will make some changes. It's inevitable. So thank you
Mm.
for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Barb. And thank you very much, everyone.